You need to let your partner know that they're wanted. We all want to feel wanted. I think we lose that part. Again, I think that might go along with the part of just assuming, oh, well, they're there and I'm going to give my energy to other people. No, make sure you let them know. It doesn't matter. Don't assume they know how beautiful they are or how smart they are. I mean, whatever. Tell them why they make a difference in your life.
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But if you're ready to level up your life and get results that truly matter in your health, business, mindset, and relationships, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to Scheer Madness, where we have unscripted, real conversations with the world's top athletes, entrepreneurs, and coaches. Discover real-world and tactical advice from the best in the business. Let's go.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Scheer Madness. Today I have a really great friend of mine coming on the show, Kathryn Gordon, and we're going to be talking all about relationships. Now, I've done a previous podcast that talked a lot about dating and what to look for in a partner and how to find a high-value partner. But today, Kathryn's going to really share with us with how we can create and cultivate a truly good relationship. And this can be romantic relationships, but this really can be any type of relationships. And when it comes to health, we talk a lot about the perfect diet, fitness, gut health, of course, on my show. But I think one of the biggest players when it comes to overall health that we don't talk about quite enough, and just overall life satisfaction, is truly our relationships. And if we really think about it, this is the reason why we try to be the best versions of ourselves. It's the reason as to why we try to work on our nutrition, work on our fitness, because we want to feel our very, very best every single day, but not just, sometimes it is to just look good naked and be confident in ourselves, but it's also so we can give more energy to the world, especially the people that we love, especially the people we're in relationships with, and be able to serve more. And I truly believe that's really what creates a fulfilling life. So I'm honored to have Kathryn Gordon on the show today. She is the executive producer of several movies, especially the Tiger Rising, most notably known. And she is the host of the Kathryn for Real podcast. I was just a guest on hers, and we talked about all things gut health. And then she is the author of the best-selling book, Relationship Grit, which we will definitely be diving into today. So, Kathryn, thank you for coming on my show today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rachel.
So I have to ask, with a few of those different titles, being a director with producing a few different movies, hosting your own podcast, and then also being an author of one of the best-selling books on relationships, what would you say would be the main title? Like, if you're like, this is really what I do the most, and this is how I like to be known for.
Well, funny enough, it wouldn't be any of those. I think for me, my biggest and still most important title is wife and mother. My kids are 24 and 22, and that saying, like, you're never done, is true. I mean, this is in that time where I'm been very, very busy, still trying to help and guide them in different ways, in more adult ways, meaning my daughter just moved to Austin and getting my son back to college. But yeah, I think first and foremost, I'm still a wife and a mother. And then after that, I would say I absolutely love doing my podcast. And I love it because of the relationships. And, of course, I wrote a book, Relationship Grit, on relationships, but I really love the connections I've made and the friendships I've forged. I mean, you're one of them. So for me, it's just been a really fun project. So yeah.
I love that answer. And I think so often we talk about all of our accomplishments, the accolades, but we're like, how really do I want to be defined? Because we are always defined by our achievements. And you're like, yes, I did all of these great things, but the greatest thing that I've ever done is being a mama, being a wife, and having meaningful relationships outside of all of these accomplishments. So I just think that's really, really beautiful to hear. You guys, we were talking about this even a little bit off show. And I was like, which one do you want me to say first? And she's like, I really don't feel like I'm really any of those. I feel like I'm first a mama and I'm a wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that so much. And especially with today's topic, all about relationships in general. And one of the things I love about podcasting too is the relationships that I built and been able to have people like you come on my show. And I learned so much just through these podcasts. I think it's better than almost any university class I feel like I've ever done. It's just been podcasting and interviewing experts on all things when it revolves around health. Let's talk a little bit about your relationship. I want to dive into romantic relationships first and foremost, because I know that's where most of us tend to have a lot of our issues in life, right? Because it's our most intimate person we're with most of the time. And I know even after COVID and people had to literally just be around their person, a lot of relationships didn't end up working out. So before we dive really deep, how long have you and your partner, John, been together?
Yeah. So, and first of all, we didn't write the book during COVID. We wrote it just before, but I have to tell you, we had to use principles in our book because John and to answer your question, John and I have been together for 25 years. Well, we've been married 25 years and together 27, but our life together has been, he's always traveled a lot. And honestly, I've always loved that, to be honest. I kind of have my own space and then he'd come in. And so all of a sudden, COVID hits and he is home 24/7. Rachel, oh my gosh, we had an office together. And so he would do his podcasting out of the office, but he wasn't home a lot. So it wasn't like I really had to, all of a sudden he was doing back-to-back podcasts out of this office. So I ended up packing my stuff up and coming back to my daughter's room. And she's, now an adult, moved on. And it's so funny. After COVID, I did want to kind of move back in there, but he was like, no, because we're so different. He is so organized. He throws everything out. He doesn't keep anything. He deletes all of his, as soon as he reads things, text, phone call. I mean, everything's got to be cleaned up. My son's the same way.
Oh, wow.
And I am more, I have to lay it out and see it to get it done.
Yeah.
So again, this is relationship grit and figuring out how to work together, because I think it's great that you have things that you are alike in, but it's great that you have things that make you different as well, of course.
Yeah, I definitely peg you as an introvert. Like you bring all of the energy, all of the fun to everything that you do.
You mean extrovert?
Oh, did I say introvert? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. Yes. Extrovert.
Yeah.
Extroverted. So bring all of the energy and everything that you do. I'm the introverted person. So I know, like for me, I definitely need that solitude, especially when I'm in an intimate relationship. That's kind of where I recharge ultimately. So it's interesting hearing you say, with how extroverted your energy is, and just all of that you bring with wanting to have some of that solitude. How do you feel like that impacted your guys' relationship, having to oh my gosh, I'm with this person now all the time? Because you learn a lot about
what
person.
It was a very, very good study. And what I mean by that is I now know it is so important that you take the time with somebody that you're starting to date or somebody that you're in a relationship or that you're married to, and make sure that you guys have some common ground. Of course, a lot happened over the pandemic with people's views of, and we won't get into them, but people's views of COVID, people's views of the vaccine, things like that. Like I saw a lot of couples split up. So it is important to have some common ground and to have common long-term goals. Again, John and I are very different. but we are definitely alike in the way that we view what we want to do on vacations. And I mean, not to the T, but like we have likenesses.
Yeah.
And so it's shown a light on our relationship during that time. And definitely there was some fighting for sure. In our case, it brought us together. There was a lot more time for us to connect.
That's interesting that you say that, because I hear that quite often, and I'm no relationship expert by any means. I have been in and out of some relationships and am now in one that I've been in for a bit over a year. So I get to learn so much from you, for someone who's been in a relationship for, you said, well past 25 years with John. So I can only imagine the things that you guys have had to really, really walk through. And it's normal, I know, for, couples to fight very often. But what I'm hearing you say is that after a fight, like, you guys actually became closer together instead of further apart.
Yeah. What we learned a lot, I mean, we talk about this in the book, but it had to practice more during that time, was it's we, not me. And so there were definitely times that I had to step back and go, you know what? I'm willing to step back in this way, or I don't need to, do what I like here. I mean, it's a real, not even negotiation. I wouldn't say it like that. It's just,
it's having a same team mentality,
picking and choosing. Yes. And just saying like, that's okay. He wants, so it was more about, this is us together as a unit. Not just what I wanted or just what he wanted. So, but what I do want to say in that, and this is so important, Rachel, for especially young people or people in new relationships, but never really stops. But I think it gets easier, is teach people how to treat you. So I have a little story. So when I first met John, now I am almost 4 years older than John. So when I met John, he was this young 24-year-old guy who had literally just got some buddies together and got some, funded some money and bought a bar in Buckhead. And I was, almost 28. By then I had stopped my party life. I was really, really big into training in the gym and meditation and yoga and, healthy, clean eating. And so we were just, on two different planes. I was walking by his bar, just walking by, and he happened to be standing outside. And that's how we met. Now, I didn't immediately like him, and he ended up chasing me, but we can talk about that later. But my point is, when we did end up going out on a date, he was quite a jealous guy. He actually still is a jealous guy. Okay. And I know he's jealous, right? So we went to this restaurant, and just I can back up and I can say that now, especially with probably a lot of your podcast listeners, because they're probably into fitness. And back then I was definitely like training. So I had a very much a fit, muscular body, right? So
still do.
I'm in this, yeah. And so I had this little mini skirt and So we go to this restaurant and we're leaving the restaurant, and I'd had, some guys just try to talk to me, and we get in the elevator. And this is the whole point of what I'm going to tell you about teaching your spouse or your partner or a boyfriend, girlfriend, how to treat you. We get in the elevator, and John turns to me and he goes, you need to work out more. And at first it kind of, set me back because, your insecurities always kick in. I don't care, we all have them. Yeah. But something hit me, and I turned around and looked at him. I'm not kidding you. I cornered him in the elevator and I go, don't you ever talk to me or say something like that to me again. I mean, it was like, boom. But I saw the look on his face, and he says, that was the beginning of me teaching him how to treat me. And so I'm not saying you have to be that aggressive, but I guess what I'm saying in relationships, we all come with our own issues, insecurities, past relationship behaviors, right? Well, he always did that, so I'm going to expect that. No, you don't have to. And so if early on you guys can really start to establish some good boundaries and teach each other how to treat you with kindness and love and respect and communication, oh my gosh, the world is your oyster. I mean, you can really develop a beautiful relationship. I don't care how horrible your past relationships have been. I kissed a lot of frogs before I met my prince. I'm telling you, I had some real winners. And so it's been a journey. Yeah.
So what are some ways that we can help teach our partners how to treat us? I love the example that you gave there when, John said something that really was kind of like a backhanded, not even a compliment, but you kind of knew what he was getting at, reading between the lines, that didn't really feel so good. And you confronted this. And I think part of the things I know I've ran into in my own relationship is setting those boundaries, but also not coming off super critical of the other person too. So saying like, hey, this is not okay, but also really teaching them on the opposite. This is actually how I feel loved, how I feel respected. And this is how, you could get the same outcome with communicating with me. How do you navigate that? Navigate not being like super critical of your person where their walls go up and then they put that defense up and then it just turns into a bigger fight and an argument, but really just like, hey, this is how I want to be loved, and really have our person want to respect us enough to really give that to us. Because I think that's, a big part of it as well too, is we can sometimes be hypercritical and lose our partner's respect, or we can do it in a way where, like you said, it's very loving, it's very alluring, and our person then wants to respect us, therefore back. And they actually respect you putting up that boundary even.
That really falls right into what I write about in my book, which is the 4 C's. And it's communicate, connect, commit, and care. And the first one is communicate. So my husband has a quote, and it is, where there's a void in communication, negativity will fill it. So think about it. When you're not talking about things, when you're not really bringing up what your concerns are, there's going to be issues. You're going to fill that void with negativity. So the first thing I always recommend in a relationship is carving out that time to communicate. And let me tell you, in general, there's normally one or both sometimes of you who are not good communicators.
Yeah.
And so in my case, John is not a good communicator. I feel like I'm the better communicator. And I would find the time that I knew was the best time to communicate with him. And what I mean by that is, I found out early on when he was walking in the door from work after been gone all day, very exhausted, tired. And I kind of go at him or bombard him with things that I need to talk about. Not the best time to be communicating. Yeah, no. And you know what? There's that saying, like, I guarantee you 80% of all fights are caused because someone's hungry. So,
yep.
And I'm one of those.
Yeah, that's
and
me
so,
too.
It was about like, I would make him come in and I even just did, like a reel on that. Most fights happen the first 15 minutes of people walking in the door, someone walking in the door. And so it's about finding that sweet spot, that time that you all can talk. And so for us, that's when it kind of segues into connect, because for us, we would take walks in the afternoon. So after he had decompressed or I had done what I did, we would take walks, and that's where we would connect and we would communicate. And listen, sometimes they weren't very positive. I mean, sometimes we would fight walking on the beach and we were like, look at each other. But by the end, we had worked things out. And that's a part of that communication. Another thing is, I find so many times that couples don't want to bring up anything that is uncomfortable, or, they don't want to say like, when you do this, it makes me feel this way. But it's so important to communicate like that. And if neither one of you are good communicators, there's nothing wrong with therapy. I mean, oh my gosh, therapy can be amazing. John and I definitely had therapy in the beginning of our relationship. So anyway, that's the first C, communicate. And the second C is connect. So finding that time. And I always like to say, take a walk, have sex. I mean, sometimes it's just that physical connection that can help you to stay bonded. So, I encourage that. And then the third C is commitment. So that is, we talked about this before off camera, but the we before me. And that is, just remembering that we are a team and it's not just one of us. And so here's what I find a lot of times in relationships. Don't you find that we give a lot of good attention to our friends. We give attention to our clients. We give attention to, somebody outside of the relationship, when meanwhile, your spouse or your partner is probably the last person that you're connecting with, in a day, and by the time you're there, you're exhausted. Yeah. So I always say, make sure that you're putting them first. John started a nonprofit early on when we first started dating, and he would literally, and poor guy, I'm like telling you all this dirt on John. I normally don't do this, I don't know why. And I can say it though, because he really, we were able to work through it. So he would go and, talk and fundraise, and he's doing all these great things. And I would watch him. Like there were times we would be somewhere and he's talking and then get in the car and talk to me negatively. And I would just be like, whoa, 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 whoa. You just spoke. So it's about bringing it to the surface, right? And remembering, no, we're on the same team. Yeah. I'm not against you. I'm for you.
95% of your body's serotonin is produced by the bacteria that resides in your gut. And this explains why when my gut was a wreck, or when clients come to work with me at Rachel Scheer Nutrition, they don't just suffer from things like bloating, constipation, diarrhea, but they also have symptoms of anxiety, depression, and brain fog, because our gut and our brain are highly interconnected. And as Hippocrates says, all disease begins and ends in the gut. And this is the exact reason why I am so passionate about taking a functional, root cause-based approach for any chronic health condition: gut issues, mental health illness, autoimmune conditions, stubborn weight loss, you name it. Me and my team do a comprehensive analysis looking at all these different systems so we can test instead of just guess, and then develop a customized nutrition plan and protocol to address these root causes and imbalances in the body and restore function. If you want to book a free 30-minute call with anyone from my team, click the link in the show notes or visit rachelscheer.com.
I think that's really common, to see that in a lot of relationships. Of what you're really describing is like, we give everybody our very, very best. We give us our energy that we have all day long. And we show up in kindness and love, even for people who aren't even the closest person in our life. And then we give our crumbs, whatever is left at the end of the day, to who we say is the most important person in our entire life. And then we take out a lot of that, whatever leftover feelings from being exhausted, tired, hangry throughout the day, just in general, burnt out after you've given so much energy. And we become critical of our partner. We take it out on our partner and become negative, like you said, even there in that situation, probably not all the time, but in that situation, and maybe a few others with John in particular. And that's a difficult one for sure. Because I know I've done that before. I think we've all done that before, where we've given our person the crumbs of what is left over. And I love that what you say there of really having like, hey, we're a team. And I even remember one of the coaches I've worked with for a while, and I agree with you in saying that we need a therapist, and we all do, individually, together, because really what it's giving is outside eyes and an outside perspective. And one of the best things I've learned on my healing journey is don't believe everything that you think. And when it's just our own thoughts, I mean, we can create stories about our partner, about ourselves, about our life situation, which is so far from the truth. So having someone who maybe isn't on a certain side to really give you some outside perspective, for me has been really healing, but also allowed me to question some of my own thoughts there. But one of the things, though, actually my therapist said to me before is, every time you fight with your person and you're looking for a winner or a loser, and you're not being same team, like wanting to both win and have a outcome where you both really benefit from, that's when I'm trying to win. That means my partner is a loser. And I don't date losers. I don't marry losers. So if I win and my partner loses, that means I'm dating a loser, and I don't date losers. And I remember when she said that to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. And that just like little switch allowed me to be like, I don't want my partner to lose. I want us to both win. So how can we really attack this and have more of that, hey, same team mentality? Because if he loses, I lose ultimately, because the relationship loses, right?
I love that. And I am stealing that because that is fantastic. And it sums it up. That absolutely. And certainly something I want to share with my daughter, who's been dating around too. So yeah, I love that. Yeah. Okay. I'm taking that from you. And so with there's the 3 C's, and now I'm going to give you the 4th one, which is care. And this sounds so like, well, of course they know we care, but it's really about showing your partner you care. And what do I mean by that? It's the little things. So, there is a study in couples, when they stop and take the time to give some attention to their partner on something, their success rate of staying together is like 80%. It's a John Gottman study. And so here's an example. John's a writer. I'm writing. And he might say to me, come in and go, hey, can you go in my office and just read this paragraph that I'm writing? I want to know what you think. Well, guess what, Rachel? I'm busy and I don't have time, and I don't want to read, I get, and so, but I'll stop what I'm doing and I will go in there. Sometimes it takes all my effort, but I'll sit down, and it's little things. Going out and helping bring in the groceries. I mean, I know some of these sound like real common sense, but when you get into, and I've seen many couples do this, when it starts to be a tug of war, meaning, maybe you have children, you're both working, you both have kids, who has to go pick the kid up from daycare? I mean, they really starts to be a lot of struggle. But if you can continue to think we are a team and we are a family, but to show you care, like I care about you, I am willing to stop what I'm doing to help you. Yeah. And I'll tell you, those 4 C's really carry not just into to relationships with your intimate partner, they carry into work relationships with your family. I mean, really, it spans all relationships, communication, connection, commitment, and care.
And I think it's like those small itty bitty moments that we don't really think matter a whole lot that really matters the most. I know one time I put out there on social media pertaining to like your partner starting their personal development journey. But when your person sends you a podcast to listen to, they send you something they're super excited about, and it's them on their own personal development journey, whether that's fitness, nutrition, business related, like listen to it, show them that you care. It's those little itty bitty micro investments that really, really do matter in the relationship. And they want you to get excited with them. And they're saying, hey, here's an invitation to come on this journey with me. And I want to be in on this with you. And really listening to that underlying message of what our partner is really, really asking for us, because then we miss out on a lot of those opportunities to grow with them or really get in on their day with them, because we live these separate days, right? We're like, I'm doing my business, he's doing his business, but these are very often like an invitation of like, hey, I want you to come in on this with me, for this moment here during the day. And I think that's beautiful, of really trying to see our person's underlying message of really what they're asking us for that. And when we say, no, I don't have time for you, there's that little kid in us who's like, I'm not important. I don't matter. They don't have time for me.
I think you just said it. And that was what the next thing I was going to say is you have to continue to grow together. And, I have seen couples where one of them decides that they're going to make a commitment to their fitness and their health, and they end up dropping a lot of weight and they're in the gym, and then their partner doesn't really like that. And what it boils down to is insecurity and jealousy. And I think sometimes when you can turn that around, and I'll give you a story. So when we were in the thick of raising our kids, John was taking off as a speaker and he was flying all over the country. And, I was home with my children and they both played elite sports. They have celiac disease. So I was having to make their breakfast, lunch, and dinner, run them to all their sporting events. It was a lot. And one morning, John came walking in. First of all, we had gotten up late with the kids. They were racing to get ready for the bus. I'm trying to hurry up, make lunches. Rachel, I'm standing in the kitchen. I've got my nightgown on and my hair is just disheveled. I look awful. I feel awful. How about that? John comes walking in and he looks so handsome in his suit. You know what I mean? And I got this pang of jealousy. And I wanted to say something to cut him down. I did. I wanted to say something to make him feel bad about himself. And then I just stopped in my tracks. And I went, John Gordon, you better be careful. Those ladies are going to be checking you out today. The look on his face was like his eyes lit up. It was like a little boy. And I realized right then that I needed to make sure in those times that I was changing my own paradigm and saying the exact opposite of what I really meant. And something wonderful happened. The more I did it, the more I kept complimenting him and lifting him up and telling him, all these great things about himself, the better I felt about myself, because that's what it really boiled down to. I didn't feel good about myself. I wasn't taking care of myself. And so even just thinking about it like that. Now, listen, it's emotional maturity, right? I'm not saying to you, if you do have a partner who's railroading you and trying to put you down and really, that's a whole other thing, and that's abusive. You may not be able to spin that. That's different. But, day-to-day interactions where you're both in the grind, you can absolutely change and transmute that kind of energy and behavior and make something wonderful out of your relationship.
I think that's such a powerful story that you shared there. And thank you for being vulnerable with sharing that. It's about wow, I wanted to actually kind of bring him down a notch because there was this own fear inside of me and how it really made me feel about myself, but really kind of putting the mirror back onto ourselves. Because I know when I've been super critical of my partner, Aaron, it usually comes at times when I'm being super critical of myself. I'm critical of me. I don't feel good about my body. I don't feel good about, the things that I'm not keeping a commitment to in my life. So when he's achieving and crushing it, or, he's doing things that make me feel insecure, and they don't make me, but I create that meaning from that. I then want to bring that person down. And I think that's a bit of human nature, because really relationships are mirrors. They're a reflection on us. So when we find ourselves super jealous or super critical of the other person, very often that's because we're being very critical and judgmental of ourselves and our body and our skin. And one of the most beautiful things I've found on my own healing journey is when I can actually show up and validate my person, especially like what you've shared. And when you wanted to cut him down, but instead you chose to compliment him and build him up, that's actually the most healing thing you can do for you in that moment. Because what you're actually saying in that moment is, you know what? I don't want to be critical. I want to build this person up, and we can't give to someone else what we are unable to give to ourselves ultimately. So really, that was very healing for you to do for you. And I can imagine even a lot of your own self-talk, because you said as a byproduct, right? Like you ended up feeling better about yourself by literally building him up.
Yep. Yeah. I felt better about myself, then I felt better about the relationship. And, it is like a muscle. It's funny, the more I did it, it just got easier and easier. Instead of it being something I had to concentrate on doing, it just came naturally. I would just look at him and say, oh, look at just little things. The other thing that I think, and John and I just talked about this is so important. Make sure that I don't care how long you've been together or how short you've been together. You need to let your partner know that they're wanted. We all want to feel wanted, right? And I think we lose that part. Again, I think that might go along with the part of just assuming, oh, well, they're there and I'm going to give my energy to other people. No, make sure you let them know. It doesn't matter. Don't assume they know how beautiful they are or how smart they are. I mean, whatever. Tell them. Just, and tell them why they make a difference in your life. I mean, John and I just had this conversation. We've been together 27 years and ended up having this conversation that was like, he was like, I really needed to hear that. I was, complimenting him about some things and letting him know I do need him, or I do want him, or I want that connection. And so, it's important. It's so important. So make sure you let your partner know that they are wanted and needed by you.
Why do you feel like for so many that is so hard to do? It seems so easy, right? Like, yeah, I'm going to validate my person, but when it comes down to it, it can be a struggle for sure.
Simple. It's simple. It really boils down to our own issues, insecurities, emotional intelligence, past relationship behaviors. It's a whole list of things that are all changeable. You can do it differently. You don't have to continue on that same path, but it's normally those things like, I'm not going to compliment her because I don't want to think she's so pretty and she's going to leave me. Yeah. Right. So it's a different mindset. It's a lower vibration. It's a lower vibration mindset. And when you can start coming from that higher vibration and that higher place, it's more positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that when you finally get awareness of that for the first time, because I think most of us, like you said at the beginning of this podcast, come in with our stuff. We've been hurt. We haven't been maybe parented the way that we needed to be parented as kids. Yep. And we bring that into the relationship. And then along with other relationship trauma that we've had, like you said, you had to kiss quite a few frogs before you found your prince. But we like to think that we're just coming in with fresh new eyes, but we know that's not true. We bring in a lot of this other stuff into the relationship. So I would agree with you with what you said there about really taking a look at ourselves, but that awareness is huge because I think a lot of people don't even have that type of awareness. We're just like, why does every relationship fail that I'm in? And we point the finger outward. We look at the other person. We're hypercritical, and we don't actually look at what we're bringing to the relationship. It's just what I'm not getting from the relationship very often too, which I talk about this quite a bit, but that's a scarcity type mindset. It's everybody else's fault. I'm pointing the finger. I'm looking for things that are wrong. And the way the brain works is whatever we look for, we will always find it. So if we look for reasons as to why something is not going to work, we look for reasons as to why, this isn't going to be successful. We're looking for my partner's faults. We're going to find those reasons. And very often we're then going to get that result. Hey, I knew this relationship wasn't going to work out because X, Y, and Z. And this pattern happens over and over and over again. And I'm only speaking from experience, of course, until you really cultivate a lot of that awareness of like, you know what? It's been me, because despite how my partner has been showing up, if I would have shown up in this way, I would have, like you mentioned, coached this person in a very loving way, how to treat me possibly. If I have shown up and given love back, despite what the other person is doing, instead of like conditional, you do X, Y, and Z, you show up perfect, and then I'll give love. I mean, that, if we really think about it, is all of our childhood wounds, right? We had to show up perfect. We had to act in a certain way in order to receive love. I know that's very much been a big story of my own as I've gotten into relationships. So we tend to do that back to our partner. So this is where even my partner and Aaron have really talked about, we can do a level of healing on our own with ourselves up until a certain point. And then we get in a relationship and we're like, oh shit, I thought I had healed from all of this. I thought I was good. Yeah. But so much of our trauma really comes from our very first relationships. They come from our parents, and then they come from other relationships. So that's where I think most of our healing, if we allow it and we have that awareness and that reflection, it can really help us get to that next place of we ultimately want to in our own healing journey, if we really look at it that way.
Well, definitely being in a relationship can fast track you, so to speak, into some great healing if you guys are in a place to do that. But also, I did some of my best relationship work when I was in between relationships. And so I always tell people that when they ask about my book, like, oh, well, I'm not in a relationship. That's okay. Either way is great. I wrote this book because, oh my gosh, I was people kept coming up to me. It was the weirdest time. Everybody was starting to split up or divorce. And I started to hear these reoccurring patterns. And, it was a complaint. Well, they da-da-da-da. And I would say the simplest thing, Rachel, did you tell them? Like, did you tell them that when they do that, that upsets you or that makes you jealous? No. And some of these people have been married 20 years. And so it just shows you, you have to be vulnerable in your relationship and say, you know what? When you do that, it makes me feel very insecure. Like, be vulnerable and be the first one to be vulnerable. That's the other thing. I always say, it's not always going to be equal. Like, sometimes you're going to be giving more in the relationship than your partner. Sometimes you're going to be sharing more. Sometimes it might be you who has to start the process of discussing something that's going on. Be that person, right? Do you really like who you're with? Do you want to be with them? Then make the effort, because think about it. If you say, when you talk to her, it makes me really jealous. Well, two responses. You could say, too bad, I'm going to do it anyway. And then you probably shouldn't be with someone like him, right? So, or the other one is, oh, I never thought about it like that. You know what? I'll really think about that when, I know she can be touchy. You know what I mean? Like, there's two ways. And the one way is really going to show you who you're with. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get what you are. I don't want to say that in the way of get what you want, but you're going to start to heal in the relationship and to start build that trust and bond and that strong foundation.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say, like, you're either going to give back. And as you give more love, you're the person who goes first, you're going to get more of that back. Or it's going to really show you who the other person truly actually is.
Yeah.
I think far often is we don't choose to go first, and then we point the finger at the other person, and then we wonder why, it hasn't really worked out. So I love that, as long as you're giving and we're always going to be effective, but trying to be unaffected, like in my love and what I'm going to give and how I'm going to show up for this person. And I'm going to go first. I mean, then it makes a lot of everything else that much more clear. In terms of, okay, this actually is just the way this person operates and they're mistreating me. And that's not something that I really want to have ultimately in a relationship. Or as like you said, is as you give more, that person then wants to give more back and the relationship grows and it gets that much better.
Yes.
So I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
so in the book, Relationship Grit, and grit, by the way, is an acronym. And so the G stands for God. And for us, it was really, really powerful for us to bring God into our relationship. And so, I talk about this in the book, but there was a period of time that there was, there was some infidelity. And listen, I got to tell you something. Up to that point, like, I didn't know anything about it. He had done it when we first had gotten married. Remember, he owned the bars. And so then fast forward, he's Jewish, by the way, and he became a Christian and he's living, this different life. And then, so about 11 or 12 years later, we're walking on the beach, one of our walks, and he literally turns to me and he's like, I have something to tell you. Like, he had been living with this. And, oh my God, I thought I wanted to kill him. I wanted to kill him because I was actually saying that I didn't feel real connected. We were talking about something like, I don't really feel connected. And Sharon and Did are getting divorced. And he's like, I got something to tell you. So anyway, but my point with that is I didn't want to talk to him. I wanted to cheat on him. Truthfully, I tried. This is weird how God does. I mean, I physically tried to cheat on him and it just didn't work. But anyway, my point with God, bringing God into your relationship. So John just continued to try. And I will say he did everything right in that I tortured him. I persecuted him. I mean, I drilled him all that time, asked him the same questions, all of that. And he never gave me a hard time. He never said, I don't want to talk about it anymore. If I wanted to grab his phone, these were all things that I did at the time because I felt so insecure learning about this thing that had happened. He didn't. So the part about God is he was on a plane and he normally doesn't talk to people when he's on planes, but he said, for some reason, I like turned to this guy and I'm like, I told my wife that I cheated, and the guy was like, okay. He goes, well, we have a family prayer. He said, we came up with a prayer. Maybe you need to come up with a prayer. And so John ended up coming up with our prayer. And I'll tell you what it is. It's, God, we invite you into our marriage and family to love us, to heal us, to unite us, to strengthen us so we can grow strong together and serve you together and raise children that glorify and honor you. So John literally said this prayer every single night before bed. If he was traveling, he'd call on the phone, say it where the kids could. He said it seriously for like 3 months, and I would never say it with him. And it got to where I knew the prayer in my head because he would say it all the time, but I wasn't about to say it. And Rachel, one night we were laying in bed and he said it, and it was like something hit me in my heart. And I knew that was the moment that I forgave him. And I reached over and I grabbed his hand and I said the prayer with him. I want to cry thinking about it. And that was the beginning of our healing in the relationship that we were to have, which we have now, which is a beautiful relationship. Yeah. So that's the G, God. And you know what? Whatever it is, I mean, I personally believe, I'm a Christian, so I believe in God and Jesus, but whatever it is, having that spiritual foundation is so important, I think, in your relationship. And the next letter is R, which is resolve. And that is resolve to stick together. It's so easy to check out. And in a lot of my past relationships, that's exactly what I would do. Things weren't good, I'm out. I was always the one to leave, right? That was my thing. And so the grass isn't greener. Like, you're going to carry those same relationships, issues into your next relationship. They may not come up right away, but they're still there. So you're rather going to resolve to work it out where you are or deal with them again. So the R is resolve. And then the I is invest. And that's a little bit about what I talk about with the 4 C's. And that's investing your time. Right? Giving your time, doing the little things. And then the T is together. And I know that sounds obvious, like, well, yeah, but again, it's we're a team. It's we, not I. And so that's the acronym for GRIT, relationship grit. And it really started out as an article. And I had wrote something on Facebook and oh my gosh, it went viral like crazy. And I realized like people are really hungry for, ways to strengthen their relationship.
Yeah. 100%. I would agree with that. That's really the biggest struggles that a lot of us truly face is relationships so much. And I love that you bring God into everything that we're talking about today, and even your relationship with God and what that really, really did for you guys. Aaron and I have always said since we've been dating, if we're not serving God, like who are we serving?
Yep.
And then we're either serving money, we're serving notoriety, we're serving all of our selfish needs. And the fruits of that in our life really will be apparent ultimately. And we had to really sit back and ask ourselves, as two very high achievers, like just like you and John, like go, go, go 1,000,000 miles per hour in an entrepreneurship type culture where it's very easy to get pulled in different directions. We had to really say, this needs to be the center of our relationship. God needs to be at the center of our relationship, because if he's not at the center, then something else will be ultimately. And I think that's a beautiful testimony of what that really did for your guys' relationship. So
yes.
Yeah.
And, to carry on into that, I don't know what your demographic of your listeners are, but we brought that into our family with our kids as well. And we started having a family meeting. And my only regret with that is that we didn't start sooner. What that did for the strength of our family unit, having this family meeting and bringing God into it. John would read a scripture or read a passage, and we would go around and say our family prayer and have talks about what was going on the week. It absolutely strengthened our family like nothing to this day. Like we still have the things that we do that keep us connected. And so, kind of carrying God and the prayer and, the connection and communication into your whole family just completely changes the dynamics of it.
Yeah.
So
it really shows like what you guys are following and like the leadership ultimately between you and John and with your kids. So that's
listen, it's not anything I was learned, right? I mean, not anything I was taught. Growing up in an alcoholic family that, there was abuse and it was, very volatile a lot of times. It wasn't something I knew, but wow, to do it and learn how to transform relationships, it's huge.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the biggest reasons why relationships don't make it?
Really the opposite of the 4 C's, which is they're not communicating. That's probably number one. Number one, where there's a void in negativity, in communication, negativity will fill it. If you're not talking to your partner, you're going to assume, probably most of the time negative, something is, they're thinking something or something's happening that isn't. So communication across the board, communication, number one, I think is one of the biggest issues. And, in life, we get so busy and, we're trying to build careers or trying to, build our financial stability. And so things can get lost in the shuffle in terms of making a commitment to your partner. I think it's really important to really take a step back and look at yourself and what issues you have going into a relationship and learn how to work through them. But anyway, to say that one of the biggest issues is communication.
Yeah.
The next one would be making someone feel loved or wanted, right? And not being treated right, not being treated with respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
now, we can always say that finances are, something to talk about. They always say intimacy, sex, and all that. And all that is, they play a part. But yeah, I think the
biggest
main
one
factors.
is communication. Yeah. And you didn't even throw infidelity in there, in terms of what doesn't make,
because that's like an obvious, right?
Yeah.
And, and a lot of times that really boils down to somebody who doesn't, at the end of the day, they don't feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
Right. To even do something like that. I really believe that, so that's what it boils down to. Trying to feed something that is not going to get fed that way.
So lack of communication, relationships definitely can't survive with that. Do you feel like relationships can survive past something like infidelity?
Well, I'm living proof of it. It's not something I want anybody to go through. And let me tell you, I'm just going to tell you, I was the one that was kind of, I mean, for lack of a better term, promiscuous. Like I was more, not even like that, but I mean, definitely more sexually open in my life and who I am. John was always this prude. And, to find that out, I was absolutely blown away. And I will tell you, up to that point, I would have said, if anybody ever does that to me, I am leaving. I mean, all the things that I thought I would do didn't happen. So do I think you can recover? Absolutely. I hope no one it's a hard thing to go through, and it takes a lot of, commitment to the relationship. And like I said, John did do a lot of things right. If he didn't, we probably wouldn't be together. If he didn't answer my question for the 15th time about what happened, or, let me look at his phone. I mean, I just had to do that for me at that point because I was still building trust. And, some therapists might say, oh, that's not good. It worked for us. It worked for us. Yes, you can recover after infidelity. And, I would just say a lot of times asking like, what's up? And John said during that time, we had just gotten married. It was very stressful. We did have a little, my daughter, Jade, who's 24 now, was tiny. It was just a really hard time. Not to say there was ever an excuse for that, but he says like he was definitely feeling, sorry for himself and, like he wasn't important. And that's the emotional maturity part, right? He wasn't mature enough to like say, this is part of the storm that we ride out as a couple.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I always say this, you're always going to have, it's never going to stay the same. You are going to go like this. So it's a matter of saying, ultimately, do I want to be with this person and do I love this person? Because you're going to have bumps in the road. Hold on. It's going to be great. Sometimes it's not going to be, things happen. So, but yeah, so you can recover.
I think
actually read my book because
yes,
and
read
I'm
your
not
book.
just saying that, I swear, because we actually have things, some action steps inside the book that I think are really helpful. And I actually have a free action guide. I forgot about that. It's a relationship grit action plan that I can share and you can put in your show notes of things you can do to make those connections, to communicate in ways to make you stronger. So,
yeah. Well, I think it's really important for everybody to hear some of those struggles that you guys have walked through, because I think what our childhood ideal looks like is we're going to get in a relationship. Our partner is going to be perfect. The relationship is going to be perfect. So when we go through these waves, like what you're speaking to, we're like, it's the person, I'm out, I can't do this. And just like you said, the grass isn't greener on the other side. We're going to continue to run into these same things, no matter who we're ultimately with. And I know there's some time, especially when you come from trauma, there is some of that mourning that takes place of like, oh my God, it's not going to be a perfect relationship. My partner is not perfect. And that goes back to some of our own stuff that we've walked through in our life. But I love that you share that, like, because you guys, looking at you today, you see this incredible relationship between you and John. You see this incredible foundation with your guys' faith that I've heard both of you guys really talk about. You see your kids who are beautiful and achieving and doing all of these incredible things. And, it's easy for someone to look at that, and your guys is even like, hey, you have a book on relationships, and be like, they just have had this perfect relationship, and to speak to be like, no, we've walked through infidelity, we've walked through a lot of our own shit. And the reason why we're where we're at today in our relationship, and the reason why our relationship is so good and our marriage is so good and our family and our values and our meetings is so good, is because of we've had to cultivate that through a lot of these hard things that we've walked through, but none of us backed out. None of us quit. And where we're at today because of that. And I think that gives so many people hope, because I know sometimes when I'm fighting with my person and things aren't good, it's hard to really, really lose sight of that. And Aaron always says, who's my partner, is we're both like just these rocks with these sharp edges, and we're put in a bag together and we're just jumbling up the bag and we're softening out each other's edges. But how cool to get to a place where you have this incredible foundation and you really, really understand yourself. And that doesn't come from everything being perfect. That comes from everything that you've described of the shit that you guys walked through together.
I love that analogy. Tell Aaron, I love that, with the bags with the sharp edges. And you are so right. I'll tell you what, it is a really beautiful thing when you can get to that place in your relationship where you are helping each other level up. Like that's beautiful. It's not the competition. And, with our book, that's funny when I tell people I wrote a relationship book, I always have to make sure I go, this is not a book that says, oh, look at my relationship. It's so beautiful. And here, no, the book is like, we went through hell and here's how we came back. It's a very, much a practical type of thing. It just, the rewards are so many when you make a commitment to each other to work on the relationship and work on yourselves. Yeah.
And I appreciate you being so human in this and not coming on a podcast and just saying like, these are the things you have to do, just do X, Y, and Z, but really saying like, hey, this is what we've had to walk through. And we're still sometimes even struggling and we still fight. And this is how we've navigated through these different things. And I think that's so incredible for everybody to hear who look up to you and say like, this is what I've been able to do to work on my relationship. And for somebody else who's really struggling as well. We all struggle with relationship stuff. I don't think
everybody's going to have issues. I mean, like you said, yeah. We do still fight. John's so funny. He jokes and says like, well, I'm also a little scared of her, but but I mean, you're going to fight. You're going to fight, it's inevitable. So how do you fight?
Yeah.
Right.
I always say, the men should have a little bit of fear towards their women, just a little bit, not too much, just a very, very small amount. And that's healthy.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to add on to that. I always say, you got to be a little crazy, not boil the bunny crazy, but crazy. Do you know what I'm referencing? The movie. Yeah. I just got a little crazy in me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, like it allows us to really be the best version of ourselves too, if you let it. And, going back to even our faith in Christianity, and that's been big in both of our lives too. I've read the book by John Eldredge before. I forget which book it's in, which is why I'm not referencing the specific book, but it was one of his books. And he's actually coaching this younger man who just got married. And this young man was previously in a relationship prior to this one where he said it was so easy, it was super easy going, but it ended up not working out. And now later he's early on in his marriage and he's like, oh my gosh, this is so difficult. I didn't realize how challenging it would be. Maybe I should have just gone with that other girl. And that thought started to come up in his head. And John's advice, John Eldredge, not your John, in the book was to this young man, well, which one requires you to be more of a man?
Ooh.
Which one requires you to be the better version of yourself? Because this other relationship was super comfortable and it didn't actually require you to have to go through your own healing to level up as a man and have to lead in a different way than you've had to lead before. So it makes sense. This is comfortable.
Yeah.
But this relationship here is actually calling you to be the better version of yourself. And I was like, that is powerful, because what a cool reframe, especially when we're like, oh my gosh, my partner is pissing me off. They're annoying me. There's all of this stuff that's coming out, and we can really reframe it as my partner's actually allowing me to step into a better version of myself. Easy? No. Comfortable? Heck no. but it's what's actually helping us grow, which is why I think the best personal development we will ever do, besides any book we'll read, is literally being in a relationship.
That is the truth. That is, yep.
And I know you know probably far more than I know too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, it's all relative, right? But yeah, being in a relationship, you have to grow. It's inevitable. You grow or you're going to die in the relationship. So I love that. That's exactly true. And I have friends of mine. It's so funny. I have single friends that are out in LA, and they're like, they'll hear me or, and they're like, oh my gosh, I think I'm too selfish. I don't even want to do that. And I, what I always say, to each his own, like no judgment there, because it does make you, look outside of yourself. So, but it's worth it. I really think it's worth it. Right. And I'm sure you do too.
It's definitely worth it. Yeah. Challenging, but worth it. Just like everything in life is anything that requires us to level up and to grow, and something that's going to challenge us with our character and who we really need to be, that's going to be one of the best things ultimately for us. Very different than being in an abusive or an unhealthy relationship, but someone who challenges us, 100% so worth it. So I love that. Yeah. Where can people learn more about your book, Relationship Grit, and all of the things that you're doing?
Yeah. So you can pick up Relationship Grit at any major bookseller. And my podcast, Kathryn For Real, is on all the platforms. And my website, kathrynforreal.com.
All right. Amazing.
And I'm on Insta as @Kathryn Gordon.
All right. We will put all of that in the show notes. Everybody go give Kathryn a follow. Go pick up her book, Relationship Grit. We'll put some of the PDFs here in the show notes so you guys can check out all of that information here. But it's been an honor having you on my show today, Kathryn. Is there anything we didn't get to cover that you wanted to leave the listeners with?
Gosh, I don't really think so. I think again, like we said, the biggest thing is communication. Communicate.
Yes. Over communicate and coming from a place of love.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for coming on the show today, Kathryn. You guys know the drill. Share this with your friends, somebody who you think would really benefit from the podcast. Leave us a review. I always love to hear your guys' feedback. And this has been Scheer Madness.